It's NBA Media Day. Everybody's in the best shape of their careers. Everybody's going to play faster. Everybody's going to take more threes. Everybody's excited for this 82-game season. We'll get you the storylines that you need to know, all that plus the passing of Dikembe Mutombo on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day and being with us Monday through Friday. We do love you being an everydayer here on Locked On NBA. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I'm a co-host of Locked On Nuggets. I'm joined by David Ramil, who's co-host of Locked On Heat, where he just got back from seeing a very disappointing Jimmy Butler haircut, David. Everybody was so excited, and Jimmy Butler just shows up with like normal hair. What's up with that?
I predicted it. I thought that would be the case because I think after a tumultuous summer and where he was questioned by Pat Riley and the fact that he's looking to get paid either by Miami or somebody, just kind of quit the acting, quit the emo emoji or the emo version of Jimmy or whatever. Just go there, get to business and get it done. And that's exactly what happened. But I will say, though, he was late and that was an excused maybe delay. But either way, he was late to media day. So not 100% perfect on today's attendance.
The boss sends out an memo and says, workplace conditions must be right. We must dress appropriately in the office. And all of a sudden, the guy's been wearing flip-flops shows up wearing a three-piece. That's a little bit more like what Jimmy's doing here. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's get to it. We're going to talk about Media Day here. We're going to break through. We're just going to kind of go rapid fire through a bunch of the teams and what we've heard here as we record this on Monday afternoon. David, let's start here. Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo at Bucks Media Day. A lot of question marks with the Bucks, obviously, after a disappointing season last year. Chris Middleton, it's announced, was going to be limited in practice. Chris tried to kind of push back on that today, being like, well, I'm still doing lots. I just can't play 5-on-5. And I'm like, so you can do everything except, play basketball. And that seems like a little bit of an issue. But with Dame and Giannis, they were asked about, hey, did you guys get together and work this summer? And they were like, no, we couldn't make it happen. Dame later said that he had planned to go to Greece. So the inclination was there that they were going to go to Greece. But then Giannis had training camp with the Greek national team, and he didn't want to get in the way of that. They were going to meet up, and there was apparently they were going to get together. But I actually heard that there was a wedding that Dave had to go to of one of his former teammates, so that got in the way. So it just didn't work out. However, it is kind of meaningful given how last season began and ended that Dame and Giannis, it's hard to say that they're 100% on the same page coming into the season.
Yeah, I'm not as overly concerned about that. I think we're kind of burying the lead here, which is Chris Middleton and his health. Like, that's a much bigger factor to me than anything that happens between Dame and Giannis. Like, they'll figure it out. They're all pro guys, Hall of Famers, etc. They're going to be just fine. And look, they'll have all of training camp. They'll have the preseason. That's really what this is for. It sounds bad. Like, I understand that the optics of it are, oh, you couldn't get together. You're the stars of this team. You have to kind of lead and show the way. And you have to, like, we all want them to envision 3 months of nothing but the team working together in the most arduous conditions, kind of like Rocky IV, somewhere in the mountains, lifting logs and hiking through snow. Well, that's not realistic. Again, as Giannis said, he was training for the Olympics all summer, or at least partly. And Dame was doing his thing, and that's fine. Like, I don't think it's that bad. I think the concern, if I was a Bucks fan, I'd be like, well, what's going on with Chris? Like, is he healthy? Is he not healthy? Because on one side, you got Doc saying, no, he's doing all the work. He's doing great. He looks great. But he's not, because he can't play 5-on-5. So you really don't know what you got. And once he does return to action, in whatever limited form that might be, that's an injury that's likely to re-aggravate, especially at this point in his career. So that's a much bigger concern for me rather than the idea of Dame and Giannis not being able to carve out some time over the course of the summer.
Right, and I get the idea of it being kind of a forced narrative, except I have a stat. I have two stats, actually. Damian Lillard last season shot 37% from the field off passes from Giannis Antetokounmpo, 30% from 3-point range. Giannis, who shoots about 70% at the rim and 60% from the field, he only shot 53.9%, less than 54%, which is really low for Giannis from 2 off passes from Damian Lillard. Look, it's 2 stats. They admitted, like Dame talked about today, how hard last season was. One of the themes from Dame's presser was in large part, hey, Doc and I are on the same page now, and we've actually kind of bonded over how tough last year was. Don't know if I love that sentiment because a lot of the guys are still there, but like whatever it was that was causing the disconnect from Adrian Griffin and carried through the rest of the season where nobody was really on the same page, it does sound like Damian Lillard said he's like locked in, ready to go. He's in a much better place mentally. And that's really positive. Doc, I am weary and wary of how much he tries to lower expectations and manage them. Where it's like, well, it's really hard. And like, this is the hardest job and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, take the job or not, man. Like you have Giannis and Dame, like take the job or not. But I do think it's just kind of interesting to look at that. From Middleton, look, my bigger thing here is, okay, even if he is healthy and he's good to go on opening night, and it's like, everyone worried about him in training camp. Are you really, does this give you more confidence or less confidence that he's going to make it to Christmas without missing time? And the answer is that's more likely he's going to miss time. It just kind of, that's reality of where he's at in his career with where they're at in the rotation. That to me is a little bit of a concern. Speaking of the Eastern Conference, and speaking of guys that have other things going on outside of basketball, like weddings to go to, or I don't know, tennis tournaments that they might want to go to. Let's talk about your team. What was the vibe? I'm very curious. I genuinely am curious about this, David. What was the vibe media day given Jimmy Butler's lame duck contract scenario?
I will say one of the kind of themes that was kind of written and coded a little bit, is the idea of all of us being on the same page. So I think there's the potential for Jimmy to be a distraction. And I don't pin it necessarily just on him, but I think it's the biggest distraction. You've got Tyler saying to media, look, I don't care. It's all about winning, whatever helps us win a championship. If I have to come off the bench, etc. In the meantime, Spo's saying, no, he listed 4 players, kind of penciling them in as starters, including Tyler and Terry Rozier. So that seems to be the starting backcourt. But this idea of like, we all have to be in the same space, on the same page. Spo said it. Bam said it. Tyler said it. Jimmy didn't say it. Jimmy talked about his contract and he was asked about it. And I think, Jimmy gives very curt answers on media day. He's very, he's very Jimmy-like, but he was also very late. And I think it could prove to be a distraction. But at the same time, Jimmy's still one of the better players on the planet. And he's still a very good player. And he's the best player on this team. For how much longer that might be, I don't know, given his age and everything else. But at least for now, I'm not overly concerned. But I think the idea that he didn't go in there with any kind of garish costume or hairstyle or anything like that, like wanting to take attention away or add any attention to himself, kind of, to me, is an encouraging sign, because it's all about a business-like mentality. Let me just get in this. Media day is not fun for a 15-year veteran, but at the same time, I can do this. I can get through it. It's not that big a deal. I'll answer your questions. He answered all politely, and then he left and goes about his business. Tomorrow, or later tonight, actually, as we're recording this on a Monday afternoon, they'll be flying to the Bahamas for this kind of camp, for their start of training camp, where it's going to be a bonding experience, because they won't have their families. Well, they won't have their respective entourages. At least that's what we've been told. And that being the case, maybe they can kind of forge out of this kind of crap of mediocrity here. They can kind of forge something better and maybe sustainable over the course of the season, should Jimmy not prove to be a distraction, which is always a question mark.
It's interesting that you said that he's still the best player on this Heat team. I think that's a real question with how good Bam has become. But yeah, there's still a lot of debate about that, and I'm sure we'll debate it some this season. All right. Up next, we'll continue to talk about Media Day. The Raptors are rebuilding. Wemby got buff. Lots of other stuff to kind of touch on. The Bulls with some interesting comments as well. We'll talk about all that and more up next here on Locked On NBA. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I had an awful weekend betting, absolutely awful. Really needed the bill. I had two things pinned. It was the Jets teaser, and that just Robert Saleh needs to walk home. Just walk home. I know they were at home when they played this game. He needs to walk back to his house. I'd be done. And then I had the Bills. Was very confident in that Bills one, and the Ravens just ran all over them. But there's so many opportunities. Plus, with the NBA season, great win totals. I've got a bunch of win totals I've already bet. Lots of opportunities, including, by the way, the Bucks under. That one's already down to 50.5. Good opportunity there. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets at FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure to tune in all week long for all of our great hosts here on Locked On NBA. All right, David, let's keep going. So Masai Ujiri is always an interesting one because he's pretty transparent, I think. He doesn't keep too much close to the vest. Presti did his last week for OKC because he does his separate. It's really funny because Sam talks once a year and that's it and doesn't talk again. But he gives them 2 hours and is just like, I will answer all of your questions now. And so Masai's a little bit like that in that he comes out and like he really is pretty honest about the team's direction and everything. And he did say, he was asked about the theme of the season, and he did say rebuilding, which is an interesting kind of note. And I get the idea, which is like, well, look, they traded OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam last year. Obviously, they're rebuilding. But they do have talent that's kind of ready to win now. They got Scotty Barnes. They've got Emmanuel Quickly. They've got RJ Barrett, who had a phenomenal season last year. They did trade picks for Jakob Poeltl and then didn't move him at the deadline or over the summer. And they added Kelly Olynyk. So, like, I'm a little bit interested in how this is a rebuilding season, David, given when you kind of look at the roster moves having at least an inclination of trying to be pretty decent and not looking towards long-term development.
I think it's a little bit of public hedging your bet, right? Like, I mean, don't expect too much from us. We're going to be rebuilding, etc. But hey, you know what? We could win 35 to 40 games because we do have some talent on there. And so that would be a pleasant surprise for everybody involved. Look at us. Don't worry about playoffs. Don't worry about expectations or anything like that. Dash them out right away. Get them done and media day. There's 29 teams that can compete for a title, and then there's the Toronto Raptors because Masai says we're rebuilding. So I think that kind of takes the pressure off of him. Certainly takes the pressure off the team and the coaching staff. And so you can just kind of go out there and compete. And whatever the result is, as a fan base, you can kind of almost live to accept it because it's just, they set the bar so low at the beginning of the season that you knew going into it not to have any kind of unrealistic expectations. And so I think they'll exceed that. They don't look like your typical rebuilding team, as you said. They've got an all-star talent in Scotty. They've got some good complementary young players. They've got enough veterans around them to make this a decent squad. Again, I don't expect them to compete for a playoff spot. I think we had them in our divisional preview. I think we had them as one of the frisky teams in that division because they're not quite as bad as everybody might think they are, and they could certainly make a lot of noise. And I think that's the case. So I find that interesting because I don't think I've ever, in my decade of covering the league, I don't think I've ever had anybody say, for a team that has this kind of level of talent, and even a bad team, like I've covered bad teams before and seen their media days, and they're still all happy and ready for the start of the season, looking forward to it. And maybe not saying we're going to be a title, but maybe make a push for the playoffs. And of course they fall short, but that's media day and the optimism that comes with it. But I've never heard a general manager on media day, when everybody's so optimistic, say, you know what? We're not going for anything. We're not a good team. And then to have Jakob Poeltl go out there and say the same thing, like basically echoing Masai's comments. So that is a new one for me because I've never, like I said, ever seen that happen. But I think it helps a lot of people kind of figure out what the season is going to be like for this group.
Elsewhere, LeBron James and Bronny James were introduced together. They met up. I think there's not like a lot to kind of take from it, other than like LeBron said he knew when he was 5 or 6 that he knew that Bronny was special and going to be a special athlete. And I think it's one of those, I continue to be of the belief, David, that I'm just like, I look at the situation and go, This is a lot of pressure on everybody to manage this. It's a lot of pressure on Bronny to perform when he gets his time. Like, everyone's in anticipation of the first moment when father and son share the court. And then, like, 1985, this is just like a really cool thing that happened. And a beat writer would be like, I was there that night. Like, here's what it was like. And here's what they said afterwards. And that would have been cool. But now it's going to be a whole damn production with like a million cameras and interviews and like this whole thing. And I just continue to wonder about how good this is for Bronny James as a person and a player with the amount of attention that's on him.
Yeah, it can't be a great place to be in. And it's unfortunate. And I know everybody's like, I've seen a lot of people, and I think even when the draft took place and I made some comments about it, everybody was like, oh, just let the guy play, etc. It's like, yeah, but like, he hasn't even set foot on an NBA court, not really, because it's a summer league and today's activities, and already the expectations are like, what kind of first play would be enough to warrant the attention it's going to get? It has to be almost like a perfect lob pass to LeBron for a finished dunk in order for it to be like, that's the perfect Hollywood moment there for that first play. And it probably won't be. It'll probably be like a blown possession or a turnover or something like that, because that's just what happens. And you have these expectations, and it just makes everything so much more difficult for him and impossible to live up to, because he just hasn't been very good up to this point. Like, he just hasn't had a very good basketball career. And I know he's had his major injury, and more importantly than anything else, like, he's healthy and able to play ball at a high level, but he just hasn't been very good enough. And the weight of expectation that comes with being LeBron James, his son, and then also being on the roster with LeBron James, your father, one of the greatest, if not the greatest basketball players of all time. It has to be so much to deal with. And kudos to them, because at least publicly, it doesn't seem like it's eroding or eating at them, and they feel like they're comfortable. They look like everything is going pretty smoothly so far. But who knows, man? Like, who knows how it's going to play out over the course of the season when you're 82 games in, you're traveling, you're going on a long road trip, and just this idea of being on a long road trip with your teammates is one thing, but also now your son is another. So I just wonder if we'll start to see kind of cracks in the facade over the course of the season.
One more thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is Victor Wembanyama. Buff.
Come on.
He's so buff. Muscle watch season, David. Get excited. He was listed at 210. He's now listed at 235.
Wow.
25 pounds of muscle. He's jacked, David. What kind of a season can we expect from a new? I will legitimately say this. Go back and look up a picture. Just look for on Google Images DeAndre Jordan rookie season, and then look at DeAndre Jordan year 5. And the difference is insane when these guys get in professional training environments. And I don't know, man. Like, I continue to one of the most fascinating questions, maybe the single most fascinating question about this NBA season to me, is how do you project? What do you expect from Victor Wembanyama? How can you not be excited when you see like how jacked this guy is, adding 25 pounds to already that skill set, man?
All right. I know you're kind of just poking the bear a little bit.
No, I'm serious. I'm serious.
You cannot be serious. That muscle watch. You come on, man. You've been covering this league way too long to buy into muscle watch. 23 pounds on a person his size is akin to like a swollen knee. Like, that means absolutely nothing. No, I will not buy into it. That weight will be gone by the end of the season. I don't care. It's not that big a deal. So he had some extra, pastries over the course of his stay in Paris for the Olympics, or maybe he ate a couple meals before coming out there and getting weight on the scale, knowing that people like you would be taking account into the going, oh, he's 20 pounds heavier. Look out. Like, he's going to have a great season regardless. Why? Because he's a damn good player. He's a damn good player his rookie season. He's going to continue to be one. And now he's got Chris Paul, a real point guard who can play alongside him. He's got Harrison Barnes. He's got Greg Popovich, and a nice cast surrounding his talent there. So I'm not excited about the muscle watch. I still think he's going to have a really good season. To your overall question about how do you project this, man, like, at this point, are we looking at his individual statistics to kind of serve as the barometer for how we measure his season? Are we weighing those more than like the success of the team? Because I think the team is going to be better than people expect, even if they're not very good and they're not going out there and saying they're rebuilding. So even though everybody might think so, but I don't know, like, in terms of what his season could look like, I'm sure it's going to be a highly productive one. And I think he's going to be in some certainly in some postseason award categories there. And I don't know. I guess it's going to be an interesting question because we're all so invested, some people more than others, in seeing their individual success. But up to this point, like postseason awards are almost inherently tied to not just their personal numbers, but also team success. So how do you separate that? Like if Victor puts up these monster numbers, but he's Victor freaking Wembanyama, and everybody's really excited about watching him play, and yet the Spurs don't win more than 25 games, does that kind of take him out of the running? It's going to be a curious test case, I think.
In unrelated news, if you're listening to this, you should absolutely look up the picture of Chris Paul with Victor Wembanyama because it is
the size
amazing.
difference.
It's absolutely, it's just great. It's just so phenomenal. I love media day. Here's the thing, David, I'm jaded and I'm cynical and all these things. And every media day I find things that make me smile because it's just like a nice time of year. No one's lost
yet. You're an NBA vet. Yeah, you're an NBA vet. You need perceived slights in order to motivate you. You know, like LeBron saying, everybody doubted me 3 years ago. I was like, who the hell said you that? You know, that's who you are right now. Nobody believes in you, Matt. Go out there and find your joy.
All right. Up next, we have sad news as the NBA Hall of Famer and legend Dikembe Mutombo passed away. We'll talk about his legacy on and off the court up next on Locked On NBA. Welcome back to Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Sad news on Monday as NBA Hall of Famer and legendary defender Dikembe Mutombo passed away at the age of 58. He'd been battling brain cancer for the past 2 years. He passed away at his home in Atlanta, Georgia, on Monday at the age of 58. Mutombo, a revered figure on and off the court. It wasn't just his defensive prowess, though he is one of the finest defenders in NBA history. Not just his influence on pop culture, his appearance in various movies and films and TV shows, and the iconic wag of the finger, but also his work off the floor. Absolutely, there's not a word for it. There's not a word for how inspirational Dikembe was off the court, including in 1997, he opened a 29,300,000 bed hospital on the outskirts of his town in the Congolese capital of Kinshasa. The work that he did in his home of the Democratic Republic of Congo it's phenomenal and worth you reading about. There are great biographies out about Mutombo as well. You should definitely check that out as well. He's been given so many awards, including the Sager Strong Award from the NBA back in 2018. He's a 2015 inductee of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. His basketball career spans so many teams, and he is one of the few players where he really was a journeyman, going from team to team. Obviously, an iconic series with the Nuggets when they knocked off the Supersonics in the 90s, featuring that image of him holding the basketball over his head, crying after the upset. That actually inspired like a lot of my career. Was like that singular image was very powerful to me of seeing what the NBA, like seeing a player care that much, could do. Dikembe was obviously an iconic member with the Hawks. He was with the Sixers, the Nets, the Knicks. He spent some time with the Rockets as well. Just an absolutely incredible player, Mount Mutombo. I had a poster of him when I was a kid as well from one of the basketball magazines. Your thoughts on the life and legacy of Dikembe Mutombo, David?
Just an incredible player. Like, I think for me, he was the first player that I recognize as just being this incredible defensive specialist. Like when, my beginnings of watching basketball and watching that kind of evolution of a career and how like fans talk about you. I wasn't there for Mark Eaton, and that was a guy who was obviously very specialized in terms of his impact on the court. But Mutombo was different. I think not only was he, I think, a better overall player than Eaton was, but he was so dynamic, and the wag and everything else like that. And the fact that you knew what you were getting with Dikembe. And even as you said it right now, I never considered him a journeyman because he was almost like he was an entity unto himself. Like, you were getting a great player whenever you had Mutombo on your team, whether it was Denver, as you said, or Atlanta or Philadelphia. Like I still remember him, even as he was a little bit, I could say, older in his career, trying to guard Shaq and the Los Angeles Lakers and just getting moved. This was Dikembe Mutombo. I remember that's an image for me that still sticks in my head is Mutombo being out on the floor trying to guard Shaq and his drop step at this point in his career, not being able to do so and realizing, oh, Shaq is just an insurmountable force that nobody can stop. If Mutombo can't even pressure him, it's something else. So it was just he was such a great and unique player and a lot of fun. And then watching Miami locally and knowing that, Alonzo Mourning here, one of the Eminem boys alongside Dikembe Mutombo, and that part of that great Georgetown center legacy with Patrick Ewing and everything else, and just all the things that he accomplished over the course of his career. And then to have this incredible second phase where he was just funny and honest about himself and his strange voice and all the things that made him kind of so unique, but then going out and just carving this incredible legacy of philanthropy to help the people of Africa. Like I can't even imagine the impact that he's had on people there, just to be able to create these environments for people that need it. And that was just, it's such a special thing to see, because a lot of NBA retired players, they take up golf or they go and then there's no knock on them. They've had their careers, they've earned it. I get it. But for him to be able to go and say, you know what, I want to be able to develop this whole other side of myself that a lot of people didn't get a chance to see maybe during my playing days, or maybe didn't even exist that we know of, really, because I never knew it. It's just incredible. It's a sad passing, and just it caught me by surprise. Even until right now, when you said he'd been battling it for 2 years, I had no idea. If it had been reported at some point, I just didn't know about it. And so I was there media day and then see the news come up, and it's just kind of just punch in the gut, because he was such an impactful person and player. So sad day, but I'm glad I got a chance to be a witness, not just to his on-court development, but also his off-the-court immersion as well.
Every year there would be a story about something that Dikembe had done.
Yes.
Off the court, non-basketball, to help people every year. And, we see these stories and they pass on by, and that's okay. Like, everyone's busy. I got 2 kids. I understand how it is. But then when someone like this passes away, you do kind of look at the totality of what they accomplished. He was he was a really strong supporter of the Special Olympics. He was on their board. He was a global ambassador for the Special Olympics. He helped found Sports United, which helps people with intellectual disabilities playing sports. It was initially focused on Congo, and it then spread to other countries all over. He was committed to so many causes all the time. Like, there's so many I missed some. Like, this one I remembered vaguely. In 2021, he created a coffee company, and it fosters women growers' participation in international commerce. Just like, hey, let's tackle this problem next. I mean, the number of things that he contributed, and if you're wondering, like, well, is he really that good as a player? He was phenomenal as a pure defensive player. He was absolutely incredible in an era where the play under the rim was so physical, and he was a larger than life personality too, in a lot of not safe for work ways. There's a couple of reporters that covered him that have absolutely legendary stories about things that Dikembe would say in the locker room, but everyone that met him was so honored and really came away so impressed with what he was able to accomplish. And I do kind of look at this from I don't want to be curmudgeonly, and I think that athletes are doing more than ever to help communities. We see that all over. Russell Westbrook opened a new wing of the Westbrook Academy last week. Players do this all over, but I will say that when I see things that are focused on like a player's brand or social media expanding, and it's like, what was Dikembe Mutombo's brand? It was helping others. That was Dikembe Mutombo's brand, was helping other people. And that to me is just an incredible legacy to leave behind.
Yeah, well said.
All right, that's going to do it for Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Tuesday. We'll be with you all week long. More reactions from training camp as those get started. Oh, before we get out of here, David, I have to ask you, what was your reaction to the Wolves trade of Karl Anthony Towns over the weekend to the New York Knicks?
Surprising, but I feel like I'm in the super minority here. I kind of like the deal for both teams. I think it helps in a lot of ways. It kind of clears a logjam for Minnesota, maybe a little bit less for Minnesota, although I still think Julius is a underrated talent, but I like it for New York as well. I don't know. Like, it feels like a win-win trade, and everybody's calling it a lose-lose trade. So maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, which is certainly possible.
I think it's definitely an upgrade for the Knicks in terms of basketball capability. You just worry about whenever the pressure really gets ramped up on Karl, he's had a really hard time. and he responded great. It's one of the things I said this over the weekend on my other podcast, Buckets, that the bummer of his playoff run was that he was so phenomenal and beat all the allegations in the first 2 rounds. And then he got caught up in the Mavs series, which should have been easier for him. And he struggled there. And if you struggle under the spotlight in New York,
oh boy,
it gets tough real quick. So I have some concerns about that.
Julius.
Yeah, for the Wolves, I honestly, my big question here is they might extend Julius Randle tomorrow. Like the deal gets cleared, they announce an extension, and it's all done. But until Julius Randle is signed to an extension, I am going to be very curious as to how the Wolves approach this, because there is no way to look at this deal and not think that it was a cost-saving move. And if you were pursuing a cost-saving move, why do you extend Julius Randle? And if you're not going to extend Julius Randle, are you really going to let him play out his contract and leave for nothing? Which essentially means that you're letting Karl Anthony Towns walk for nothing. And if that's going to be the case, what do you do then? Because there's already been reports that the Detroit Pistons and Atlanta Hawks were both interested in trading for Julius Randle. So I kind of wonder if the Wolves are retooling on the fly. And I wonder if there's more moves coming, but we'll have to wait to see that. And we'll have all that covered for you here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to go to youtube.com/LockedOnNBA. Hit the like and subscribe button. If you're listening on podcast, give us a 5-star review. Those things help out so much. You have no idea. Give us that support, because we try and provide you with great NBA content, good analysis every single day. You can catch David over at Locked On Heat. He's on Twitter at DRamil13. I'm at HP Basketball and at Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On NBA.